Welcome to Davies Media Design. My name is Michael Davies, and today I'm going to be showing you how to create fantasy lighting in a photo in Gimp version 2.8. This is a fairly easy technique, but the results, as you can see, are pretty professional. It just involves using some layer masks and the color dodge tool or color dodge technique and some lighting techniques that I'm going to show you today. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and the first thing I'm going to do is open up the image that I'm going to use, and I'm just going to go to Open Recent and click on Fantasy Girl. That's the name of the picture I'm going to be using. Okay, so once that's open, the first thing we're going to do here is scale the image, and that's just to make it a little easier to work with. And if your computer is a pretty good computer, you don't really need to do this. I'm just doing this because I think most people out there could use a little break for their computer. This will just make it faster and easier to work in the program itself. The next thing I'm going to do is crop this photo. So I'm going to grab the crop tool in my toolbox, and I'm just going to click on the top left and then drag to where I want the crop to end, so about right here, and then I'm just going to click once, and now we have our crop. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is create a new layer, and I'm going to go ahead and name this layer black, and under layer fill type, I'm going to make sure it is black. So right now black is my background color, so I'm just going to choose background color. If you don't have black as one of your foreground or background colors, which by default I believe you do, you can just go ahead and select transparency as the fill type, and then just grab your bucket fill tool, choose black as your foreground color, and then just click inside the black layer, and that'll fill it in with black. So the next thing I want to do is add a layer mask, so I'm just going to right click on our Fantasy Girl JPEG layer, go down to Add Layer Mask, and make sure it's selected as white full opacity, and then click Add. And now we have a layer mask over here. So with that layer mask, the next thing we're going to do is come over here and grab the Ellipse Select tool, and we're just going to click and drag so that it covers her face, and now I'm going to just kind of make adjustments here by clicking on the outer regions of the square surrounding the ellipsis. Oops, and I just made a mistake, so I'm going to hit Command Z. I'm actually going to start that over. Command Z or Control Z is the undo button, or undo shortcut I should say. I'm just going to drag this out, and I'm just trying to get a little bit of the hair in here because she does have like a golden kind of colored hair that I want to emphasize. Alright, so then go to Select, Invert, and that'll select everything outside the ellipse. I'm going to grab my bucket fill tool, I'm going to double click the opacity and change it to 50, make sure my color is black, and then I'm just going to click in that area outside the ellipse. And now I'm going to go to Select, None, and as you can see now there's this ellipse surrounding her, and we want to get rid of that line. That line is way too prominent. So I'm just going to go to Filters, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I'm just going to increase that blur to about 150. Make sure the vertical is the same. Click OK. And now we got that line blurred, which is what we want. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is grab my Paintbrush tool, make sure the opacity is set to 50. Again, if it's not, just double click it and type 50. Make sure you have a decimal, and go ahead and paint. Make sure the brush size is the size you want to have it, just over 200. Doesn't have to be exactly that. Command Z. Right now I have my Apply Jitter selected, so I'm just going to unselect that or deselect that, and go back and just start painting the area around her. And this is just to kind of darken that, the nature scene behind her, the tree trunk and all that. Just kind of creates an effect that makes it look like she's basically being framed by this darkness here. And I'm going to go ahead and decrease the brush size. And I'm actually going to decrease the opacity here to 20. And I'm just going to come in here and add some shadowing here around her face, but we don't want too much shadowing. So I'm going to Command Z because I actually put a little too much there. So just a little bit of shadowing. Just going to add some maybe up here and just a tiny bit over here. Again, we don't want to do it. We don't want to overdo it. I'm going to decrease the brush size some more and just get in here. Alright, this should be fine for now. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is add a new layer, and I'm going to name this layer Dodge Burn. And that is not the color we want, so we're going to go ahead and change that color to a dark gray. So I just double clicked my foreground color, moved this to where I wanted it, so it's like a darker gray with the bucket fill tool, and just click inside that layer and make sure your opacity is set to 100. And let's redo that. Then come up here under mode, change it to overlay. And now go ahead and grab your dodge/burn tool, and I'm going to come over here and make sure the exposure is what I want it to be, which, anywhere between like 15 and 30, I guess, is a good exposure. Just going to increase the size here. And I'm going to start with like the cheeks and her forehead and just the areas that I want to be brighter or highlighted. This is basically going to highlight those areas for me. And by the way, I have the range set to midtones here. You want to try to do it all in one kind of sweep, because if you don't, you're going to see like the dots from where you stopped and started, because then you have different dodge instances compounding on top of each other. So I'm going to zoom in now to her eyes and her mouth, and I'm going to decrease that the size of that dodge. One around 4 or 5, and I'm just going to use that effect around the eyes here. And just use it on the eyes themselves. And this is just kind of highlighting the eyes. And then try to highlight the color of the eyes here. And we're going to do something in a second that's going to do kind of a better job of highlighting like the iris. So this is kind of like a preliminary step towards that. We're going to do along the nose. Okay, so I'm going to switch over now to my burn tool, and I'm going to use this to accentuate kind of the shadows of the image. So I'm going to grab my zoom tool and zoom out by holding command on the Mac. I believe it's control on the PC. And I'm going to grab that tool again. So again, I switch the type over to burn, and now I'm going to increase the size here because we're going to use this on the shadow portions here. So wherever you see shadow, like in her hair or on her face, you know, just use this to accentuate those shadows. But you don't want to overdo it. And I'm going to go back to my dodge tool and do the same thing for her hair. As you can see, the hair lights up. And since she has this golden color hair, it really works well. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is actually go back to that layer mask and grab my paintbrush, and I'm going to change the color now to white. And I'm going to go back and decrease the size of the brush first, and I'm going to kind of uncover the portions of this image that are in the shadows that I actually want to be lit up. So I'm going to start like with this band she has on. I'm going to increase the opacity here to say 50 for now, and just kind of go over this because these are parts that we do want to be. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do here is add another layer, add a new layer, and we're going to make this a transparency layer, and we're going to name it Color Dodge. Click OK. Change the mode to Color Dodge, or just Dodge. And we're going to go ahead and grab our paintbrush tool here. I have the opacity still set to 50, and my color now is gray. And what this gray does is it just kind of creates like a spot of light on the image. If you want a particular color, like let's say you want the color of these flowers here, you want to go ahead and grab your color picker tool, which I'm going to show you in a second, and you know, use those colors. But for the eyes, I'm just going to use this gray, and that'll bring them out very quickly. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on the lips. And I'm using the gray still, but I actually want to decrease the size of the brush here. As you can see, it's creating this highlight on her lips. And like I said, you can grab the color picker tool, click on that original layer, and grab the color of where you're highlighting and see if that works better. In this case it doesn't. I'm actually just going to leave the lips how they are right now. But I'm going to go ahead and zoom out and a little more. And I'm going to grab that original layer, grab the color picker tool, grab the color of the flower, go back up to my color dodge layer, only click it once, grab my paintbrush tool, increase the size a little bit, that's too much, and just click on that flower. And as you can see, that flower is now, you know, bright, so it looks like it's glowing basically. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my color picker tool again, grab the color of this flower, and just do the same thing. So make sure you're back on your color dodge layer. And I'm just doing the same thing. This time I'm going to use it for these green portions here. And I'm just going to make the brush a little bigger. Command Z. So as you can tell, if I accidentally paint on the original layer, it looks really dark, but if I go back up to the color dodge layer, that's when it gets really bright. So I'm going to go back to my layer mask here, and I'm just going to add a little blur on it because some of the lines are a little too noticeable. And I don't want to add that much, I just want to add like 10. Just a tiny bit. Another thing is I'm going to mess with the color balance here. You can do that before you do the color dodge, if you haven't, been kind of going along with me. If you're just kind of watching this, you can do this color balance before you do all the color dodges, but in my opinion, it doesn't matter that much. You don't want to overdo it. I start with the midtones, now I'm going to do the shadows. And you can click this preview button here to see a before and after highlights. And I don't really need to do much here because the original was pretty decent, but I'm just kind of adding some yellows here to make it glow a little more. And if you think your color dodge, is a little too much, you can grab your eraser tool and go back and erase the color dodge a little bit so it's a little further back. Alright, so now I'm going to create another new layer, and I'm going to name this light, because we're going to create some light rays. So I'm going to grab my lasso tool up here, and I'm just going to create little, basically like triangular shapes, but I'm going to not connect them until the end here. You just want to make sure that they all are relatively, in the same direction. It doesn't have to be perfect, but, make it close. And then I'm just creating points by clicking, and then I'm going to connect that very last point so that now I have all these shapes. I'm going to go over to my bucket fill tool, I'm going to switch the color to white and fill in those shapes with that white. I'm going to go to select none, and now I'm going to go over to filters, blur. I'm going to add a motion blur first, just a tiny bit, and just click and drag your preview box if you can't see those shapes until you do see them. So I'm not really adding that much motion blur to them. Alright, just click OK. And now I'm going to go to filters, blur, Gaussian blur, or Gaussian blur, whatever. And now I'm just going to increase this so that they look more like sun rays coming in rather than geometric shapes. But you don't want to blur it too much. So I'm going to go with 25 and see how that looks. That looks pretty good. So now I'm going to come back to that light layer, and I'm just going to turn down the opacity a little bit so so that it's not too cheesy looking. Alright, there we go. Now I'm going to create another layer and name this dust particles. Click OK. Make sure it's a transparent layer type or layer fill type. Then I'm going to grab my paintbrush again. I'm going to decrease the size. Not too small, but not too big. That should be good. Make sure that it's a soft brush and the opacity is still 50. But now I'm going to apply that jitter. And as you can see, what I'm doing, the jitter, by the way, the amount, you can change the amount here. But what I'm doing is I'm very quickly clicking and dragging. Try not to be too quick, otherwise it won't register. But basically, quickly clicking and dragging to create particles without creating too many. And it's going to take some time. So if you mess up like I'm doing, then you can just hit Command Z, or if your computer isn't keeping up. But yeah, then you're just going to want to change the color to like a golden color and do the same thing. You don't want too many, like that's too many. So you're just adding a few. You can go ahead and add a soft glow to these if you want. Yeah, it's not super effective, but if that's what you want to do. But you do want to probably add a little bit of blur to them, a little motion blur. There you go. Just got to kind of move around the preview box until you get them in there. So you can add a little motion blur. And that didn't really do much, but whatever. So go ahead and turn down the opacity a little bit. And I'm actually going to add some Gaussian blur to that because they're a little too prevalent still. Just a very slight amount of blur. And now they kind of blend in a little better into the background. So we can kind of do a before without all these effects. So that was before, and this is now with all of our effects. So as you can see, it's a little more dramatic and a little more fantasy-like. If you don't know how to save or export this, you can save it as a .xcf file, which is the native Gimp file. So all you gotta do is go to File, Save, and it'll save it for you as a .xcf. If you want to save as JPEG, go to File, Export As, come down here to select File Type, and scroll down to JPEG, and then click Export. And you can adjust the quality to whatever level you want. You got some advanced options in here. I wouldn't really recommend messing with those if you're a beginner. Just click Export when you're done. And there you go. So yeah, that's the end of the tutorial. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, go ahead and subscribe to my channel at youtube.com/daviesmediadesign. You can follow me on Twitter at daviesmediades. Visit my website at daviesmediadesign.com or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/daviesmediadesign. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.